I only took the job because it was Petsmart. That's it. No deeper reason. No gut feeling. I wasn't chasing some dream or pulling some Nancy Drew stunt. I just needed a paycheck that didn't involve flipping burgers or cleaning puke out of roller coaster seats, and Petsmart sounded safe. I'm a veterinary student, 2 years in, barely scraping by. If I couldn't land a clinic internship, at least I could work around animals, right? Bag some kibble, scoop some litter, maybe even shadow one of the vet techs if I was lucky. When I filled out the application, I checked off every available shift. Morning, afternoon, closing, I didn't care. But when I showed up for the interview, Scott was already waiting in the front lobby, like he knew I'd come early. He stood up from the bench with a smile that was a little too wide. His teeth were perfect, unnaturally white like TV anchor white, and his handshake hurt, like he wanted to see how hard he could squeeze before I flinched. "You're Jasmine, right?" he said. I nodded. "Great, I've got one opening left. Overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Monday through Friday." I hesitated. "I thought this was more of a day job?" Scott shrugged. "Animals don't sleep on our schedule, they get restless." His tone dipped just enough to make the hair on my neck prickle. I laughed, just a little. I figured maybe he was one of those weird bosses who leaned into workplace lore, like haunted aisles and haunted aquariums. Maybe he was joking. He wasn't. He pulled a laminated sheet out of a drawer behind the customer service counter and slid it across the desk toward me. The rules were printed in thick black capital letters, sharp against the plastic. No decorative font, no humor, just bold instructions like they were policy for handling toxic waste. Scott didn't smile this time. He stared me down with those two bright eyes and said, "Follow these exactly, every night, no exceptions." I picked it up and started reading. Petsmart Night Shift Rules. Rule 1. Feed the cats first. If one of them growls but doesn't move, do not approach. That one isn't ours. Rule 2. The reptile tanks must be misted in reverse order, from the far wall to the front. If any enclosure is already fogged before you begin, skip it. Rule 3. When cleaning the bird cages, keep your mouth closed. If one of them mimics your voice exactly, cover their cage and leave the aisle. Rule 4. Do not make eye contact with the guinea pigs. If one stands up on 2 legs and watches you, say, "I'm just here to help," and break eye contact. Rule 5. At midnight exactly, a leash will appear hanging in the grooming station. Take it to the fish section and submerge it in tank 12. Rule 6. If any dog in the adoption kennels speaks, not barks, not whines but speaks, you must respond with, "I'm not your feeder." 6 rules, each one weirder than the last. Misting reptile tanks backwards, not making eye contact with guinea pigs. It sounded like a twisted scavenger hunt cooked up by someone who'd taken one too many edibles in the break room. "I'm guessing this is like a joke?" I said, raising an eyebrow. Scott didn't laugh. He just turned and started walking toward the back. "Clock in at 9:58 sharp. The register auto-locks at 10:01. If you're late, the system flags it." No smile, no welcome aboard. Just that cold, corporate delivery like he was reading off a cue card in his head. I should have walked away then. I should have told him I wasn't comfortable, or that I found another job, or even that I just didn't want to work nights. Instead, I nodded like an idiot and followed him to the back hallway. That night, I showed up just before 10. The parking lot was nearly empty, the sky heavy with summer humidity and mosquitoes. I unlocked the associate entrance using the badge Scott had given me, and the moment I stepped inside, something shifted. The air was different. Not colder, not even that heavy. Just still, like the building was holding its breath. All the lights were on, every aisle glowing sterile white under those buzzing fluorescents, but the place felt abandoned. No music, no chatter, no beeping scanners or barking dogs. Just the low hum of water filters and the occasional clink of metal from the grooming station. I walked past a display of clearance chew toys, gripping my clipboard like it was a weapon. The animals were quiet, even the birds. I reminded myself it was a store, a chain, a place where people bought catnip and aquarium gravel. Nothing weird, nothing haunted. Then I reached the back wall, where the cat enclosures were lined up in 2 rows, and my heart stuttered. One of the cats, a long-haired tabby, was already watching me, not blinking, not moving, just watching. But I could hear something deep in its throat, a sound I didn't expect. Not a purr, not a hiss, a growl. and suddenly the laminated sheet in my back pocket didn't seem like a joke anymore. The clipboard in my hands felt heavier than it should have. I held onto it like it might shield me somehow, even though it was just plastic and paper. The cat enclosures lined the back wall in 2 neat rows, each one lit from above by a tiny fluorescent panel that made the fur of the sleeping animals look oddly gray and flat. I counted 10 kennels in total. 8 were occupied. 7 of those cats were doing what cats do: pacing, stretching, batting at the glass with bored curiosity. One even pawed at my pen as I leaned in to check its water dish. Then there was number 8. The long-haired tabby in the bottom left enclosure didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even twitch its whiskers. It just sat in the far corner, back legs tucked under its body, eyes fixed straight ahead. I crouched down to get a better look. The overhead light cast a yellow ring across its back. Its tail thumped once, like a warning. Then I heard it again, that low, underwater growl. It didn't match the animal in front of me. The sound was too deep, too long, like the air itself was vibrating. I checked the tag above the cage. Lulu, female, spayed, 3 years. "Hey Lulu," I said softly, trying to sound calm. "You okay, girl?" She didn't respond. Her eyes didn't follow my voice. The growl kept going. It wasn't constant. It rose and fell in steady waves, never fully stopping, like breathing. I shifted onto one knee and looked more closely. Her chest wasn't moving. There was no rhythm in her ribs, no visible breath. That's when I remembered Rule 1. Feed the cats first. If one of them growls but doesn't move, do not approach. That one isn't ours. I stared at the rule list in my pocket like it might rewrite itself, like maybe I had read it wrong. But I hadn't, and I was already way too close. The growl stopped. That should have been my cue to back away and pretend I'd never seen her. Reported it in the morning. Anything. I didn't know what the consequences were yet, but they were starting to feel real. And besides, what if it was just a sick cat? What if she needed help? I pulled the latch open, slow and careful. It clicked louder than I expected. Lulu didn't react. She stayed perfectly still as I reached in with the small silver bowl of wet food, trying to keep my hands steady. Then she lunged. I didn't even see her move. 1 second she was frozen in the corner. The next, her mouth was around my wrist. I screamed and yanked back, and that's when the pain hit. Not the sting of claws, not the burn of a scratch. This was deep. A cold shock ran all the way up my arm like I'd plunged it into a bucket of ice. She let go as fast as she'd struck, just released me. No hiss, no snarl. Just stepped back into her corner and sat down again, calm as ever. My heart pounded in my ears as I slammed the cage door shut and backed away. Blood dripped down my forearm, hot and sticky. I pulled a roll of paper towels from the nearby sink and wrapped it tight, biting my lip to stay quiet. Then I looked at the wound. 2 rows of punctures. Too neat, too deep. Not a cat bite. There were no curved fang marks, no uneven tear like you'd expect from a feline. These were clean, surgical, parallel, like something with straight, perfect teeth, like a shark. I laughed. It came out hollow and cracked. It was all I could do to keep from crying. I grabbed the first aid kit from under the counter and cleaned the bite as best I could. My hands were shaking, but I managed to tape on some gauze. It didn't look good. The skin around it was already purpling, and my fingers felt weirdly stiff. I wanted to leave. Every bone in my body told me to grab my stuff and walk straight out the door. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not after what Scott said. Besides, I wasn't sure I could explain this to anyone. How would I even start? So I took a breath, picked up the clipboard, and forced myself to keep moving. The reptile section felt colder. I don't know if it was the humidity control or the constant low hiss of the misting machines, but something about that part of the store gave me the creeps even in broad daylight. At night, under buzzing fluorescent lights and surrounded by walls of glass, it felt like walking into a science lab that had been abandoned mid-experiment. My wrist was still throbbing under the gauze, and the stiffness was getting worse. I flexed my fingers just to make sure they still moved. They did, but barely. I gripped the clipboard tighter with my good hand and stepped past the tortoise habitat and the supply bins into the aisle lined with tanks. Each glass enclosure stretched chest-high, with leafy bedding and artificial rocks stacked inside. The air was thick with moisture, and the glass panels had already begun to sweat. I pulled the sprayer from the wall and checked the instructions on the checklist, same as what Scott told me. Mist the tanks in reverse order, from the back wall to the front. If any enclosure is already fogged before you begin, skip it. I scanned the aisle. Tank 6, the anole tank, was already clouded. I remembered that part of the rule and stepped past it, but I didn't start at the back. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or maybe my brain was still stuck on the cat that wasn't a cat. Either way, I started with the tank closest to me. Tank 1, then Tank 2. Forward to back, not back to front. I only realized my mistake when I was halfway down the row. The checklist in my hand blurred slightly, and my pulse jumped as the words on the page seemed to mock me. I turned around and looked at the tanks behind me. That's when I heard the clicking. Soft at first, just a tick. Then another. Rhythmic, sharp, like something tapping its claws on glass. I turned again. Nothing. The tanks were all quiet. Still. Some of the reptiles had curled into their hides or pressed against their heat lamps. One gecko blinked at me lazily, not reacting at all. But something felt different. I stepped closer to Tank 4, the one I'd just misted. The condensation on the glass had vanished. It wasn't running down the side. It wasn't dripping into the substrate. It was gone. I wiped my palm across the front just to be sure. The glass was bone dry, not even cool to the touch. I moved to Tank 3. Same thing. Tank 2, dry. I swallowed hard and checked the ceiling, like maybe the misting system had shorted out and sucked the moisture back in. But there were no vents up there, just lighting panels and a few dusty ceiling tiles. Click. The sound came again. Louder this time. It echoed from behind me. I spun around and caught movement in one of the far tanks. A flick of motion, a tail, a tongue, I couldn't tell. I stepped back. The mist was completely gone now. Even the anole tank, Tank 6, the one that had been fogged before I began, was now clear as glass. I could see every leaf, every water droplet, every scale. Something wasn't right. I raised the clipboard again just to give my hand something to do. My eyes scanned the tanks for any signs of movement. Nothing shifted. Nothing blinked. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the glass was watching me. Not what was behind it. The glass itself. Like if I stared long enough, I'd see a reflection that didn't match. The clicking sound had stopped. I should have left then. I should have walked straight to the front doors and pulled the fire alarm or broken a window. Anything to get someone else inside this store. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, heart pounding, throat dry, skin damp with sweat. I backed slowly out of the aisle, sprayer still in hand. When I turned the corner toward the bird section, I heard a single tap behind me. Just one. Like a knuckle on a window pane. By the time I reached the bird aisle, my pulse had calmed down enough to stop pounding in my ears. But the tension was still there, crawling under my skin like a rash I couldn't reach. The clipboard felt damp in my hand. I wasn't sure if it was the mist or my own sweat. And honestly, I didn't want to check. The moment I stepped into the bird section, I was hit by the dry, sour scent of seed husks and stale feathers. It stuck in the back of my throat like dust. The cages were stacked in a neat row. Cockatiels, conures, budgies, one lone African gray that sat perfectly still with its head tucked down like it was asleep. I wiped my palms on my uniform and pulled out a clean rag. The tray cleaning wasn't hard, just routine. Slide out the drawer, toss the seed waste, wipe, reinsert. I'd done it before during training, and nothing weird had happened. Not yet, anyway. The first tray was clean enough. A few scattered husks, a splash of water. The bird inside flapped its wings once, but didn't make a sound. I moved to the next one. This tray had a few droppings and an overturned seed cup. I slid it out, grabbed a fresh paper towel from my belt pouch, and started wiping. That's when I heard it. "Is this really what you want to do with your life?" I froze. Not because it was a weird thing to hear, though it was, but because I knew the voice. It was my mother's, not just similar, not a vague impression. It was exact, down to the cadence, the little upward tilt at the end, the disappointment barely hidden behind a forced politeness. I turned around too fast and nearly dropped the tray. The voice had come from the middle cage, where a cockatiel sat perched near the bars, staring at me with round black eyes. It tilted its head to the side like it found me amusing. My mouth was dry. The rule flashed in my head. Rule 3. When cleaning the bird cages, keep your mouth closed. If one of them mimics your voice exactly, cover their cage and leave the aisle. Okay, that wasn't my voice. That was my mom. But it shouldn't know it, right? I swallowed hard, stepped back, and reached for the cover cloth hanging beside the cage. Before I could touch it, another voice rang out, closer this time. You're just like your dad, always running away. That one hit harder. It came from the conure 2 cages over. Green feathers, orange beak, head bobbing slightly. It was my ex-boyfriend's voice. Nate. Down to the smug little sneer he always used when he wanted to make me feel small. I froze again. And then I heard the worst one. A soft, high-pitched sobbing. I didn't even have to guess. My little brother. He was 6 the last time I saw him cry like that. In the hospital, after our dad walked out for good. I could still hear it sometimes when I closed my eyes too long. That helpless, lost sound, like a heart breaking out loud. The African gray made the noise. I dropped the rag. My hands shook as I grabbed the covers and threw them over the cages. 1, 2, 3. Each motion jerky and clumsy. The moment the fabric dropped, the sound stopped. No words. No cries. Nothing. Just silence. I backed out of the aisle, heart hammering like I'd run a sprint. My mouth wouldn't close all the way. I realized then how dry it was, like all the moisture had been sucked out of me. I gripped the shelving rack on the end cap just to keep myself upright. My knees were unsteady. My bitten wrist throbbed again, sharp and sudden. I should have left. Right then. I should have marched straight back to the associate door and swiped out. But I didn't. Because I'd made it this far. Because I was too scared of what might happen if I didn't finish the shift. The rodent aisle was dimmer than the others. Not darker exactly. The lights were still on, but the air felt heavier, more saturated, the kind of thick stillness you get right before a storm breaks. I wiped my palms on my pants and stepped past the hamster cages. They were spinning in their wheels or nibbling on cardboard like nothing was wrong. Totally normal. Totally harmless. Then I reached the guinea pigs. 6 enclosures lined the wall, 3 on each side, stacked in plastic tubs with glass fronts and wire lids. Most of the guinea pigs were asleep, little blobs of fluff curled into hay piles or tucked into corner huts. One yawned when I passed. I almost let out a breath. Then the 5th enclosure caught my eye. At first I didn't realize what was off. The guinea pig inside, a brown and white puffball, was upright. Perfectly upright. Not fidgeting, not wobbling, just standing, on its hind legs, completely still. It was watching me, not blinking, not twitching its nose, just watching. I stopped walking. There was no other word for the feeling that crept into my spine. It wasn't fear, not at first, like being sized up by something that shouldn't know you exist. The rule came back instantly. Do not make eye contact with the guinea pigs. If one stands up on 2 legs and watches you, say, "I'm just here to help," and break eye contact. My mouth was dry. My brain screamed to look away. But I didn't. I looked straight at it. Its black eyes were bottomless, not in a poetic way, in a literal way, like there was no surface, just open space, leading nowhere. I forced the words out through stiff lips. "I'm just here to help." My voice sounded flat, like it didn't belong to me. Then I dropped my gaze, turned my body slightly, and stepped backward. I didn't look up again. I don't know how long I stood at the end of that aisle, but my phone buzzed in my pocket and I nearly screamed. It was exactly midnight. The number glowed on the screen like a curse. 12 a.m. My pulse kicked back up. Because I remembered what came next. Rule 5. At midnight exactly, a leash will appear hanging in the grooming station. Take it to the fish section and submerge it in tank 12. That was it. No other instructions. No explanation. Just do it. I walked toward the grooming station with numb feet. The store felt emptier than before. Even the humming seemed quieter now. The kind of quiet that makes you start thinking you've gone deaf. I turned the corner past the dog shampoo and stopped cold. The grooming station was exactly how I left it, except for the leash. It hung from the highest hook on the left wall, bright red, thick nylon, the kind of leash you'd use for a large dog. But it wasn't dangling, it was tight, stretched upward, like someone taller than me was already holding the other end. I didn't want to touch it. Every inch of my skin told me not to. My hand burned from the bite on my wrist, the gauze hot and tight now. But I stepped forward anyway. I grabbed the leash. The moment my fingers closed around it, I felt it. Resistance. Not mechanical. Not gravity. Something was on the other end. Breathing. Moving. Fighting me. The air around me dropped 10 degrees. My breath came out in a puff, visible in the lights of the grooming mirror. The leash yanked once, hard enough to nearly pull me forward. But I held on. I didn't speak. I didn't think. I just turned and started dragging it down the center aisle, through the silence. Every few feet, it pulled back. Sometimes it twisted, like it was trying to coil around my hand. Other times, it thrashed, like something on the other end had too many legs and didn't know how to walk right. The overhead lights flickered faintly, as if trying to die quietly. I reached tank 12. The moment I got close, the fish inside scattered. They didn't dart around like normal fish, they fled. Pressed themselves to the corners of the tank and shook like leaves in a storm. The leash in my hand began to vibrate. It wasn't even pulling anymore. It was shaking, like it was fighting something invisible. Then I realized, this wasn't maintenance. This wasn't tradition. This was a ritual, a sacrifice. I stared into the tank, saw nothing but murky water and silver streaks of terrified motion. I let go of the leash. It dropped instantly, coiled on the floor like a severed limb. The weight in the air vanished. The temperature returned. I could breathe again. Tank 12 bubbled once, softly, like it had sighed. And that was it. I turned around and walked away without looking back. Just one task left, the adoption dogs. And I already knew it was going to be the worst one yet. I didn't want to go to the kennels. The fish aisle behind me felt safer somehow, even with the leash still curled on the tile like a severed tail. There was something final about what I'd just done, some invisible scale tipping just enough to make me feel like I'd passed a test I didn't know I was taking. But the rules weren't finished, and I knew what came next. Rule 6. If any dog in the adoption kennels speaks, not barks, not whines, but speaks, you must respond with, "I'm not your feeder." The rule felt different from the others, not procedural, not cautionary, it felt like a warning. I moved slowly down the main aisle toward a back left corner of the store, where the kennels lined the wall in a crescent. The floors were clean, the metal latches all shimmered under the lights. Everything looked fine. But the silence was wrong. Dogs don't sleep through the night like cats do. They stir, they whine, they breathe loud. These didn't. The first 2 cages held curled-up shapes barely breathing. The third was empty. The fourth had a German Shepherd lying flat with its eyes open, unmoving. The 5th kennel made me stop. A black lab sat in the center, front paws planted firmly, eyes wide open. Its fur was glossy and neat, its ears didn't twitch, its tail didn't wag. Then it spoke. "You need to leave." The voice was clear, not barking, not growling. It was a person's voice. I froze. It looked at me, head slightly tilted. Its mouth didn't even move, the sound just came from it. I said, "You need to leave. Now." My throat locked. I couldn't breathe. My brain reached for the rule, but the words tangled together like wire in my mouth. The dog stood up slowly. Its amber eyes didn't blink. "The animals here aren't animals. Not anymore." It took a step forward and bumped its nose against the latch. There was a soft metallic click. The gate opened. It stepped out. "I'm going to count to 10, it said, voice still calm. "If I reach 10, you're not leaving." I turned and ran. I didn't wait for 1. I just bolted. My shoes skidded on the polished tile as I rounded the center aisle and sprinted toward the front, only to find the gate sealed shut. The sliding doors didn't move. I tried the emergency exit. Nothing. My heart thumped in my ears as I ran back toward the middle of the store, desperately looking for another exit, any side door, any back room, even the loading dock. But every path seemed to twist. I turned into the fish aisle, and the shelves were wrong. Closer, taller, like they'd shifted behind me. The space narrowed until I was trapped between tanks, nowhere to run. Behind me, I heard paw steps. Measured, steady, no hurry. It knew I had nowhere to go. 3, 4, I spun, ready to grab anything. A fishnet, a broken filter, anything. And that's when I saw it. The red leash, floating behind the dog. It wasn't being held. It moved on its own. It slithered through the air, coiling like smoke, then snapped forward, wrapping around the dog's legs with impossible speed. The lab let out a sound, not a bark, not a scream. Something old, something that didn't belong to lungs. It twisted, thrashed, tried to bite at the leash, but the red line tightened, pulling its legs together and yanking it backward into the shadows behind the tanks. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I sprinted until my legs burned, past the rodent aisle, past the bird section, back through the front entrance, and into the employee hallway. I slammed the associate door open with my shoulder and tumbled out into the night air, lungs gasping. The parking lot was empty. The sky had gone pale with early dawn. I stumbled behind the dumpster, knees giving out, and just sat there. Eventually, my phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I didn't want to know if it was from Scott or from something else. I looked down at my wrist. The gauze was soaked through. The bite had spread. Dark lines spidering out under the skin like ink in water. My fingers were stiff. I couldn't tell if it was the night air or something deeper. The store behind me was silent again. Waiting. I didn't go back. And I never will.